In a silent basement room, a well-dressed corpse lay, hands folded on his chest, waiting for his final family gathering before the long solitude of the grave. I looked down into his pale face, familiar and foreign in the way of old family photos, and dabbed more blush onto his cheeks. It was a good face, heavy with laugh lines. Even with his eyes glued and his jaw wired shut for the open casket funeral, he had the look of a trickster. Like at any moment, he'd sit up, announce it was all an elaborate prank, and ask me to pull his finger. The fact most of his organs had been removed made that unlikely, but, considering his family history, not entirely out of the question. I had never met Great-Uncle Ptolemy, but from what I've been told, if I had, he probably would have flattered me into buying him alcohol, and then done something to get himself banned from whatever establishment had the misfortune of hosting us. Since he was an old-fashioned eccentric, and a lush, I regretted never having met him only for the hell we might have raised together. Looking down at him, lying on the table in the prep room of the Rosenfield funeral home, as I touched up his makeup for his last public appearance, I felt sorry for him. Aunt Persephone told me once that he had a touch of the gift in him. Not enough to do anything, but just enough to make him open to the influence of the other world. According to her, it had driven him a little wacky. That certainly seemed to be the case. Though he'd been pushing 80, he hadn't managed to put together a proper will. Yet he had left strict instructions he was to be buried barefoot, wearing his favorite bow tie. It was rainbow, with a staring plastic eyeball in the center. I straightened it with a grimace. I hadn't seen anything that tacky since my first stumbling attempts into counterculture fashion back in middle school. I'd grown out of my trip pants and ironically pop culture accessories. Uncle Ptolemy apparently had not. But then, discovering you had real, dangerous power over death itself can do a lot to make a person lose their sense of whimsy. I adjusted the foundation on Ptolemy's forehead with an artist's care, but my mind wandered, reaching out for the senses that lingered outside the edge of normal perception. Death hung in the room, in a way that wasn't so much feeling as it was a parasympathetic response in the vagus nerve to something less tangible. I was aware in a very particular way of not just Uncle Ptolemy on the table in front of me, but also the 4 bodies waiting in the mortuary refrigerators along the wall. The best way to describe it? A low chime so quick you barely heard it, but always present. When my work took me to graveyards, I was surrounded by a constant murmuring wind chime chorus, glittering faintly like the stars on a clear night. And in Ptolemy himself, so close at hand, I noticed something else. An emptiness yawning open, waiting to be filled. I bit my lip, considering. It had been a while since I'd siphoned any power. If I let it continue to build up, it would become an uncomfortable pressure, and eventually difficult to control. And who better to use my powers on than Ptolemy, who was in a unique position to understand my predicament?